Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Fight Song Sports Podcast. As always, my name is Ty Hansen. Joining me today, Bryson Lewis. Bryson, we're down to the Final Four in the NCAA tournament. We've had an exciting tournament so far, and we got some, what do you want to say, predictions, recap on what we thought of the tournament, and go and continuing into that Final Four. We're gonna save that for last, just because that's kind of what we've been covering the past couple of weeks. We're gonna go back to the OU Nebraska news here for today. Catch you guys up on kind of what you missed while we were covering that March Madness tournament. We'll start with Oklahoma. Bryson, what do you got for us?
We'll start on the OU basketball side of things. And the men, disappointing into the season, they lose to St. Bonaventure in the second round of the NIT, 70-68. I say disappointing. I don't know. I mean, the disappointing as a whole, missing the tournament and stuff. But St. Bonaventure, they were a tournament team last year, and with the exact same roster, literally every player returned, used their COVID years. So it was an experienced tournament team. And they came to Norman and kind of just kept OU arm's length the whole way. OU had two shots at the end to try to tie it. Neither of them went down. So they'll just kind of turn towards next year now. Tanner Groves is returning. Elijah Harkless is returning for their COVID years. And then CJ Nolan, the true freshman from this last year, is also returning. And Mo Gibson is going to test the pro waters, reported by John Rothstein. I imagine that's probably going to be mostly overseas. It'll be up to him. Maybe he wants to come back, run it back one more time, and try to maybe get an NBA draft pick the next year. But they'll just kind of turn their attention to the portal. Other than Mo Gibson, they're probably going to lose two guys, A.K. Muane and Rick Asanza, to the portal. Both big guys. Neither of them really played a ton this year. They'll probably have 2 to 3 spots available. They really need a scorer, probably a shooting guard type guy, and preferably a big man. I don't think Tanner Groves can really get it done at the 5 in the Big 12. Night in and night out. So we'll just kind of see where that takes them.
Yeah, you're getting some key pieces back for sure in Tanner Groves and Elijah Harkless. But you do lose Mo Gibson, which is an interesting name to lose. You had some big games out of him this year, and we talked about him a lot, how he would have a big game and then just kind of go quiet. But anytime you're getting 30-point production out of a player and you're losing him, it's obviously going to be a big loss. But you get your experienced guys back, especially Tanner Groves, who just transferred in this year, was at Eastern Washington last year, and they obviously made the tournament, and he's got some tournament experience there. And obviously for a team that was right on the bubble, I mean, probably the first team out this year. Anytime you got a guy with, tournament experience coming back, and then also it's not his first year at the program, it's going to be his second year. You got to like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And Mo Gibson, not hiring an agent, could still elect to come back, maybe just getting a draft grade. Who knows? I'd probably expect him to go at this point. He went through senior day, but we'll see. The women also ended their season in disappointing fashion. They got blown out by Notre Dame at home, 108-64. And it's a disappointing end to a good season overall. They were a 4 seed with an almost identical roster to the previous season, in which they hadn't made the NCAA tournament in 3-4 years. And Notre Dame, if anybody knows anything about women's basketball, that's a traditional women's basketball power. They're in the Final Four Elite Eight almost every year. And they did follow it up and almost beat number 1 seed NC State just the other night. But they do lose Gabby Gregory to the portal today. She was kind of a 6-man type of role. Didn't see a ton of action in the NCAA tournament, however. And I believe they both get Maddie Williams and Taylor Robertson back. I believe they both have COVID years. I'm not positive on that, but if they do, they've got potential to be a very good team again next year, adding some talent in the recruiting class.
Yeah, for sure. I definitely do think that it was a disappointing way to end the season. I think just because of the obviously the score, losing by that much in an NCAA tournament game is never good. And they had a great year. And I mean, you made it into the second round. It's about all you can ask for, really. But just, you look and you see 108-64. That's you never want to end your season like that. That one stings.
Yeah, absolutely. So both those programs will look towards next season, and we'll toss it over to you for some Nebraska basketball.
Yeah, so obviously Nebraska had a disappointing year this year. Obviously not even close to making the tournament or anything of that sorts. And it's beginning to not look great for next year. Bryce McGowan's does decide that he's going to head to the NBA draft. Not really a big surprise. I think most people in Lincoln were kind of expecting that. Just because of how this season went, and anytime you're, a player of his caliber on a team that, struggles to win just 10 games, it's not like he's at Duke or Kentucky or North Carolina or anything like that. I mean, he's playing at Nebraska on a, last place Big Ten team. It wasn't a big surprise. I think a lot of mock drafts have him kind of late first round. Obviously a big name to lose. But we do have somebody coming in. We have Sam Griesel coming in. He's a Lincoln native, coming in from North Dakota State. He was a two-time All-Summit League player. Is coming in, obviously originally from Lincoln. Fred Hoiberg originally from Lincoln as well. So people are loving that connection, and anytime you can get somebody who is from the hometown coming back to school, you gotta love that.
Yeah, absolutely. And losing Bryce is a massive loss. It's difficult to replace a guy like him at any program, especially when he's kind of the vocal point of your offense. And adding Griesel, he's a guy averaged over 14 points a game, and he shot the ball really, really well this year for North Dakota State, like 48% on the year, and also like high 30s from three. So he's a guy that he's going to be able to get you some points. We'll see how he adjusts to the Big Ten competition level, but just kind of see how the rest of the offseason shakes out for Nebraska.
Yeah, and I think at this point, it's just kind of wait and see what happens. Not a ton. You kind of get that mass rush of news right after the season with everybody coming in and going out, and then it kind of starts to settle down, and you just go back to work over the summer and early fall and get ready for next year. On the women's side of things, they were fortunate enough; they had a really good year and were able to make the NCAA tournament. They got a first round matchup against Gonzaga. They ultimately fell in that game 68-55. That was in the 8-9 game. A game that I felt like, we definitely should have won, especially considering how many top 10 wins we had this year and how well we played against good teams. I felt like, it was a game we probably should have won, ultimately lose by 13. Kind of frustrating, but, getting into the tournament, you can't complain. And especially with the year we had, we had a phenomenal year. But, similar to OU, just kind of a damper on the way things ended there.
Yeah, absolutely. And it was definitely a team you kind of expected to get into the second round. Like you said, multiple top 10 wins, and probably wouldn't give a 1 seed. Obviously 8-9 is a tough position to be put in for any team. Probably wouldn't have given a 1 seed a run, but a win in the NCAA tournament can do wonders for motivation and momentum going into the offseason.
Yeah, for sure. So
we'll go ahead and switch it over to.
Go ahead. Yeah, we're going to move on to golf, and we'll start with Oklahoma. Yeah. I'll let you start there. How have they been doing?
Since the last time we talked about them, they've only played one tournament, and that was the men's NIT. Some really good teams out there: Oklahoma State, Texas, Pepperdine, all the top teams like usual. And OU finishes fourth there. Kind of a down week for them. Obviously, when you're playing competition like that, you can get beat on any given weekend. Chris Goddard tied ninth. Welch and McAllister, Patrick Welch and Logan McAllister tied 16th. So maybe a little bit of an underwhelming performance from those guys. I believe Oklahoma State finished first at like 53 under or something ridiculous like that. So anytime a team's playing Super Bowl like that, you're probably not going to beat them. They've got the Calusa Cup coming up next Sunday through Tuesday. There's a couple good teams out there. Georgia, who Oklahoma's faced off against a couple times. Florida, Clemson is top 20 teams as well. And we'll see if they can bounce back a little bit, maybe put in a little bit better performance. And on the women's side of things, they went to the Mountain View Collegiate, and they finished tied fourth. A little bit better than their first event on the season. Hannah Screen finishes tied 10th. And they've got Red Raider match play coming up this weekend. We'll see if they can keep improving as the season goes on.
Yeah, and on the men's side, announced this week, Logan McAllister is playing in the PGA Tour event this week with the sponsors exemption, the Valero Texas Open in San Antonio. Obviously competing as an amateur, but he will get some more big PGA Tour experience on that team. Got her up played really well in Puerto Rico, the Puerto Rico Open earlier this year. Obviously, another PGA Tour event. I mean, that just speaks to how good this program is. I've said it in the past, and I mean, you've got two different guys, getting to compete as amateurs in the PGA Tour, in one given year. That's just incredible. And you do finish fourth in a good tournament. I mean, Oklahoma State, Texas Pepperdine, OU, those are the best golf programs in the country. Any of those teams are a toss up for the best.
Yeah,
So we'll
absolutely.
go ahead. You got anything you want to finish up on there?
I was just going to touch up on, I believe Patrick Welch also, he won the individual tournament a couple of weeks ago. He's also going to get an PGA appearance. So, I mean, anytime you're
Is
stacked like
he
that.
is he in the tournament this weekend?
No, not this weekend. It's the Shriners Open. It's not for
Yeah,
several months, I believe.
because he won earlier. I forgot about that. So there's going to be 3 this year,
Yeah.
3 players that are going to have. That's insane.
Yeah, that's
for a
incredible.
college golf team. That's insane.
Yeah, we'll go ahead and toss it back to you and talk about Nebraska golf.
Yeah, so kind of the same thing as OU and really just college golf in general. Haven't played a whole lot. You don't play every single weekend in college golf. They went out to North Carolina and competed in the Seahawk Intercollegiate. The men obviously finished 8 out of 14 teams. Will Marshall tied for 32nd at 6 over. That was the highest finisher for Nebraska. And then Brandon Meyer shoots a career best 69. Pretty average weekend for the team. They when they were down in Arizona, they played pretty well and weren't too far off the winners. But North Carolina Wilmington, who hosted, dominated, and I believe won that tournament by quite a few shots. I think they might have been the only team that finished under par, if I remember right. Obviously, when you're hosting a tournament and you're playing at the golf course you play every single day, you get a little bit of an advantage. But 8 out of 14 teams isn't too bad. Pretty average, pretty middle of the field. But I definitely think that they should, improve on that a little bit. And they're not in action again until April. I forget the dates, but I believe it's middle of April. They don't have another tournament until then. And then on the women's side of the things, they competed in the Briars Creek Invitational. They finished tied for 11th out of 17 teams. Megan Whitaker, finished tied 18th, 4 over. That was the highest finisher for the Huskers in that event. Once again, another kind of middle of the pack. 11 out of 17 teams. It's all right. They also are not in action again until April, I believe. Tournament hosted by NC State. I'll let you correct me if I'm wrong. But just kind of college golf that I don't really understand it. Why you're not playing more than what they do. Both these teams, I think, I've only played in maybe 1 or maybe 2 events in March as a whole. And then I think it's just 1, maybe 2 in April as well. So during the spring months when it's starting to warm up, you're only competing in 3-4 events. It's just the thing I don't really understand about college golf. I don't know why they're not able to get out there more. Obviously, you don't have to play every single weekend, but when the weather's warm, I feel like you are able to at least go down south and play somewhere. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially when, there's basically no days where they're outside in the off season up in Nebraska, and you can't really build momentum when you're taking 3 weeks off in between tournaments.
Yeah, I will say that it is cold today. It hasn't been warm that much at all. Fortunately today, 63, and then, tomorrow 42, and we're almost in April. But, that's the nature of playing golf in kind of the upper Midwest. Literally you're flying to North Carolina, to Phoenix, and to Florida, wherever you're playing, and you go play, there for 3 days, and then, turn around, come back, and you're stuck indoors. And, there's not a whole lot of golf. Fortunately on a day like today, you can come outside and probably play a little bit. It's 60 degrees. The wind howls up here though, and the grass is dead. So in the Midwest, winter golf is not real fun.
Yeah, not at all. So we'll go ahead and switch it over to softball now, and maybe our quickest segment every week, we'll talk about OU softball right here. They're 29-0, still undefeated. Still just steamrolling everybody for the most part. They dominate the Hall of Fame Classic. I believe win every single game by run rule out there in that tournament. And then they schedule a midweek game, kind of like they did last year with Georgia, which produced their first loss. But this year they went out to number 8 Kentucky and they run ruled them 9-1 in 6 innings. And when you're run ruling top 10 teams in the country, it just shows how dominant you are, how excellent you are. And then they got into Big 12 play. They swept Baylor. Run ruled the first 2 games. The third game, a little more difficult. Baylor's pitcher was phenomenal in the third game. They were up 1-0 the entire way until the bottom of the 7th. Then T.R. Jennings comes in and hits a walk-off 3-run home run. And I think that's 2 games this year where OU has won on a walk-off run. And almost every single other game has been a run rule for the most part.
Yeah, I mean, 29-0 is ridiculous. I mean, that's basically half your season, and you're undefeated. And that's half your season, including making it all the way to the World Series. You know, at some point you got to think they're going to lose. And I mean, can they win 60 games in a row and win and go undefeated the whole way? Yeah, they easily could. But you got to imagine they're going to drop a game at some point, I would think. You know, I mean, they've had a couple close games and they've been able to pull it out though. I mean, it's not like they haven't been tested. They have been tested a few times. And, you know, they haven't let it get to them. I mean, you're down 1-0 in the bottom of the 7th, you know, your back's up against the wall and you've been shut down the entire game. And all of a sudden you're able to get a couple runners on. And then fortunately a walk-off home run. I mean, when a team gets in the groove of just run ruling every single team, every time you go out there, you're playing 5 innings and winning by 15 runs. You know, it can be difficult in tight games. And, you know, obviously relating it to another sport, but it kind of reminds me of Gonzaga last year with basketball. You know, Gonzaga undefeated, you know, the whole way. And it was kind of like, you know, when you're making your brackets, it was like, you know, do I pick a team to go undefeated the entire season and win the national championship? Like, it's just not likely. And so, you know, you got to imagine they're going to drop a game at some point, but I mean, they're the better team in every game they play against any team. It doesn't matter. You know, like in just the nature of softball, they'll likely drop a game. You know, you get a pitcher who's on, you know, an offense who's got the bats rolling for a game. But I mean, 29-0 is just stupid. I mean, it's ridiculous.
Yeah, absolutely. And they've got Wichita State coming up tonight and then a series against UAB this weekend. And expect some wins there, obviously. But we'll just recap it quickly next week, I assume. So we'll go ahead and toss it over to you for some Nebraska softball, and they're playing pretty well right now.
Yeah, they've got it rolling right now. They're 21-9. They swept the Rock Chalk Challenge in Lawrence, Kansas, obviously hosted by the University of Kansas. However, they did not play them. They were 2-0 versus Tulsa and 2-0 versus South Dakota. They swept them, and then they had a series against number 19 Michigan this past weekend and beat them 2 out of 3 games. That third game was canceled, so obviously 2-0 there. So, you know, they've got things rolling, and especially against a good Big Ten team getting into conference play, obviously, you know, ranked team, and you're able to take both games you play against them. You got to love it. They, I believe, are in action against Creighton tonight. And then they have Rutgers coming up this weekend, obviously continuing with Big Ten play. I mean, 21-9 is phenomenal, especially when they started off with, you know, kind of what I thought was a little bit of a rough start when they opened up in Northern Iowa inside the Dome. You know, got walked off and then lost another game I definitely thought they could have won, and started 2-2, and now they are, you know, 21-9. They've got it rolling.
Yeah, absolutely. And they were a 500 team last year, and we said they've got a lot of experience still. We'll see if they can get into the tournament this year. And right now, it certainly looks like they're going to be there.
Definitely looks like it. I mean, you know, when you're 21-9, you that momentum's there, and you got to imagine that they're just going to continue to build upon that, and you know, and carry it throughout the rest of the season. And you know, it worried me a little bit when they had Michigan. You know, obviously a great team there, and you know, even with the game getting canceled, you know, you're still able to take the series 2-0. You got to love that.
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll go ahead and switch it over to baseball now. And OU had kind of an eventful weekend. They were 14-8 now. Since last time we talked about them, they swept UTSA, who we talked about is a pretty solid team. They have a win against Sanford. They went 2-0 against Air Force, but then they drop a series to New Orleans at home. But this weekend they started conference play. They took on Baylor. They take that series 2-1, and it was a pretty wild series. They hit grand slams in game two in the 8th and 9th innings, a Peyton Graham walk-off grand slam in the 9th to win it. And then they dropped the third game. It was 8-7 after 6 innings. And then it was another one of those big innings that they've kind of been prone to giving up to every now and then. They gave up 5 runs in the 7th and ended up losing 16-8.
Yeah. Yeah. That game against Baylor that they were able to walk off, Peyton Graham hit a moonshot and knew it and pimped it. It was pretty cool to see. He definitely got all of it, and he knew it. But dropping that series to New Orleans, I think, is frustrating. That's a series you easily should be able to win. And then, it's just kind of the same story of the big innings that have plagued them this year. Anytime you're up 8-7 and then end up losing by 8 is never good. I mean, it's you score 8 runs in a ball game and you expect to win that 9 times out of 10. And then, not only do you score 8 and lose, you still lose by 8, which is frustrating. It's just the big innings, the big numbers that plague them.
Yeah, absolutely. And for the most part, it's been defensively. I mean, 5 errors in that third game. And obviously they had already won the series, so it's not a huge deal. But when you've got the slate that they've got coming up, you need to sweep these series against teams that you're better than. And they've got Oklahoma State tonight and Tulsa, and then Texas and Arlington on the weekend. And that's obviously 2 of the top teams in the country, 2 elite programs, and maybe expected to not win a single game out of those 4.
Yeah, I mean, welcome to Big 12 baseball. You get Baylor's a phenomenal baseball team year in and year out, but kind of gets slept on because it is the Big 12. I mean, you've got Oklahoma State, and then you get to follow it up with Texas. Those are 2 top 10 teams that you get back to back. I mean, that's what it's like in the Big 12. I mean, you literally could go probably 15 games in a row, and you're playing a ranked team every single game. That's what it's like in the Big 12. And you got to be able to bring it. And just because you might take a series against a top 25 team, doesn't mean that you've got it all figured out, because you're going to turn around and maybe even play an even better team the next weekend. I mean, I didn't even mention TCU either. TCU, another phenomenal team there. And if you're looking at what Texas Tech is doing right now too, Texas Tech has it rolling. Which they always do. I mean, the Big 12 is, outside of the SEC, is probably where you want to play college baseball at. And, it's tough because this OU team is pretty good. And then when they get into that, meat of their schedule, if it doesn't go right for them, it can get ugly real quick.
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll see how they fare in the next 4 games against top 10 team. But talk to us about Nebraska baseball, kind of underperforming this season.
Yeah, it's been frustrating. Such a good year last year, and especially, they got an unfortunate draw in that Arkansas regional last year, but really played well and showed that they were one of the top teams in the country. Even as a 2 seed in that regional, they went, pound for pound with a phenomenal Arkansas team. And the expectation this year was to host a regional, be a 1 seed, and ultimately make it to the College World Series. Haven't been there in 15 so years now, and they're off to a 9-13 start. It's been really kind of frustrating to watch, and it's just been underperforming as a whole. Is kind of what I would say. One game it's the offense, another game it's the pitching. They're just not a very complete team right now. And I think, the panic might be able to, or is starting to set in, I should say, because what your expectations are and what kind of team this is, what caliber of a team it is. And, you look up and you're 22 games in and you've only got 9 wins. I think that panic might be starting to set in a little bit. they're having to come from behind a lot. They've got 3 walk-off wins already in just 9 wins, and a third of them are walk-off. That kind of both good and bad. I mean, you're having walk-offs against teams like Texas A&M, Corpus Christi, and New Mexico State, and another one. 2 teams that I felt that they should have taken care of fairly handily. And you're having to walk them off, which, you'll never turn down a win, but that's a lot of pressure to ask, when you're expecting your offense in the bottom of the 9th inning to get a couple runs to win. They walked off Texas A&M, Corpus Christi, and then later that series, you lose 21-4. I mean, it got ugly quick too. They were down 19-0 at one point. That's supposed to go the other way around. Nebraska's supposed to be beaten up on Texas A&M, Corpus Christi, and not, not to say that they're not a good program. Obviously, mid-majors down in Texas are phenomenal, and Corpus Christi, obviously another, fairly solid team. But I mean, you're down 19-0. I know baseball happens. I know you're going to get beat by these teams, but I mean, that cannot be a fun dugout to be in, down 19-0 to Corpus Christi, who, you're bringing up, and hell, you're probably paying them to come play you. That just can't be fun. And that, it's kind of, what I refer back to, that panic kicking in, like, man, this can't happen. This should not be us. And you start pressing a little bit. And then, they head into Big Ten conference play. You've got Michigan right off the bat, obviously another phenomenal team, a World Series finalist team just a couple years ago. They won one game. They went 1-2, obviously lost the series. And, that one game they won, they went 13-9. Obviously, you got to love scoring 13 runs for sure, but when you kind of break it down and analyze it and get into that box score, they scored on a walk, a throwing error on a pickoff, 3 hit by pitches in a row, and then an error on the shortstop. So, yeah, I mean, you're scoring runs and you're putting pressure on them. And anyway, you're scoring runs is obviously a positive. But that 13 run is a little bit different than it is you just lighten it up and putting barrels on balls, driving it in the gap, hitting home runs, or executing, hitting runs and steals and sack bunts. I mean, you can fight out a good at bat and walk. A throwing error on a pickoff, you just don't have much control over. I mean, 3 hit by pitches, you don't really have any control over. An E6, yeah, you put a ball in play and made them make a play. But obviously they kick it, but you're not really producing a ton of runs. They're just kind of handing them to you. And that's kind of what I mean by this team is just kind of underperforming as a whole. That's a game that if you're Michigan, you got to be like, man, we lost that game. They did, Nebraska did not win it. Nebraska didn't go out and win it. Michigan just lost it. Michigan just gave it to them. And I mean, you'll take any wins you can get. As I said, you're not going to turn any of them down. But, when you just kind of break it down and analyze it a little bit, that easily should have been 0-3 against Michigan to open up Big Ten play. And Michigan, who is a good team, and Nebraska should be competing with as well. And that's a series that should be 3 phenomenal games, and people are watching across the country, and it just wasn't.
Yeah, absolutely. And for a team that, like you said, made some noise in the postseason last year, it's just been super disappointing. And kind of like Oklahoma has been, obviously Oklahoma's got a little bit of a better record, but defensively, they just seem to be letting themselves down. You're giving up 21 to Texas A&M, Corpus Christi, 9, even though you won against Michigan. And Michigan, like you said, is a good team, but you just can't be giving up those numbers.
Yeah, I mean, you can't win a game when you're giving up 21, and then you're giving up 21 to Corpus Christi, and you're a team that's supposed to be hosting a regional this year. It just can't happen. I mean, it just, shouldn't happen.
Yeah, absolutely. So they're going to Ohio State this weekend, see if they can start to build some momentum. But we'll throw it over to
Creighton
OU football.
Creighton tonight as well.
Gotcha.
Yeah, at TD Ameritrade, so it should be good.
They're going to need to build some momentum in a hurry if they want to get into the postseason here. So we'll go ahead and flip it over to football now. And OU has started up spring practice. By now, they're about halfway through, a little more. They've probably got 6 or 7 practices left. Nothing groundbreaking out of spring practice so far. Obviously, mostly just installing new systems, figuring out where your personnel is going to fit. But we've had some interesting quotes from some guys that have been here. Billy Bowman just 1 year, but Theo Weiss 3-4 years now. And Theo Weiss was asked about Dylan Gabriel, and he kind of gave everybody an eye-opening answer, um, saying, "Oh, Dylan Gabriel's like actually willing to go in and watch film with us and help us get the little things right." And for OU fans everywhere, obviously the coaching staff kind of was let everybody down last year, I think. As we look back on it, we see quotes like that. It just really makes you think. And I think that quote probably goes for both Spencer Rattler and Caleb Williams, the two quarterbacks that Theo Weiss has played with. And obviously, Caleb, true freshman, you can't really bag on him too much for that. But Spencer Rattler was a guy, I mean, Heisman Trophy, #1 draft pick last year. Those were the expectations. And I mean, that's got probably why he failed. And that probably falls on the coach because I know that there's a lot of speculation that Lincoln Riley hadn't made a previous Heisman winning quarterback watch film at all. We won't name names on the podcast, but that's a massive red flag to me. Um, and it's really eye opening. Your team leaders, I mean, your quarterback is supposed to be the leader of your team, not in the film room with the guys they're throwing the football to. But the other side of things,
And
Billy Bowman,
I'll,
go ahead.
I want to just put my input in on that a little bit as well. I think, you hear about Gabriel getting in and working with the guys and watching film. And, obviously in the past you've had Caleb Williams and Spencer Rattler last year, both, #1 quarterbacks in the country, both of them. And now you got Dylan Gabriel, who, I mean, comes from Hawaii to UCF, really kind of, he got into UCF at the right time, obviously with their success that they had there. And he was able to continue it after Scott Frost left, obviously, and had Heupel there, and then transfers to OU. But this is a guy that was not a, top, recruit in the country. And he didn't go to a Power 5 school. I mean, he went to UCF and, got to shine at the right time and got a smaller school, and not, group of 5 school at the right time when they were good, and got to show it. And obviously he's a phenomenal quarterback, and then comes into the Power 5 school and is working with the guys on film and talking to the guys. I think it might be just kind of that culture difference and how that Dylan Gabriel maybe has, not to take anything away from the guys who are ranked top in the country, but Dylan Gabriel's had a different path than those guys. I mean, he is a phenomenal quarterback but has really kind of had to make a name for himself at UCF and at a smaller school, and now is just getting his chance to shine at a big school. And it's maybe just those little things that you see that make those small schools great for a couple years, as you get a guy like this in and is a leader and is able to take a, group of 5 school to, 9-10 wins and some good bowl games, as he did, and lit up the record books there. And, instead of coming in and, oh yeah, I'm the guy, I'm #1 in the country, I have all these Power 5s and I get to pretty much just pick and choose where I get to play. It's maybe just that attitude difference. And I think it might be something that OU needs. And obviously I think Brent Venables just has to love it. Not to, trash on the past coaching staff that was in there. But to me, Lincoln Riley seemed like let's get all the #1 guys and we'll just win based off of talent, which obviously you want the best players in the country playing for your program. But Brent Venables to me seems like hey, like the guys we have, we're going to turn them into some dudes. And, I don't care who you are, everybody's going to get a shot. And, I don't care if you were #1 or, number 101 or, it doesn't matter. You're on level playing field, and whoever works and wants it the hardest and performs the best is going to get it. And I think that's just kind of the culture change that OU has, been suffering from the Stoops to Riley to now Venables, that 5 years or so that Riley was there. Obviously you would know, and you have an idea, obviously as an OU fan, but just kind of from the outside looking in, that's just kind of what I see in what has it been, 3 months that Brent Venables has been head coach?
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. It was definitely a thing where, I mean, Lincoln was only recruiting a quarterback once every other year, and it was always obviously the #1 guy. Um, but it's definitely a complete 180 in culture. I mean, it was undisciplined under Lincoln Riley. Every year, offensive line, everything got a little bit worse. Um, we won't rehash strength and conditioning issues, but it wasn't great. If you're a team like Oklahoma and you're getting bullied by Iowa State, Baylor, who, like, not to take anything away from those guys, but you've got more talented guys, bigger
Yeah.
guys than those guys, and you're still getting bullied. But we'll move on. The next quote was Billy Bowman, and he was a true freshman last year. He saw some action early at Nickelback, but he was also returning kick punts or not returning them last season. But he kind of made a point of emphasis in this question. They weren't really allowed to return kicks or punts last year unless they needed them. And special teams, I think everybody kind of knows, was a little bit neglected under Lincoln Riley. They never had a special teams guy on the staff. The coaches just kind of all tried to work on it, but it was never emphasized in practice. And now another complete 180. Every practice OU's opening with special teams work, strictly special teams at the beginning of every practice. And it's clearly a point of emphasis for Brent. They've already hired a guy, not on the field staff, but in the support staff, to look at special teams, do all that stuff. And those were just kind of two eye-opening quotes from spring so far. But one other interesting thing was videos coming out of Brent Venables out of spring practice, just getting after everybody. And that wasn't something you really saw from Lincoln a ton. But I mean, even getting after guys in stretching lines. And I mean, it just kind of fires you up a little bit.
Yeah. And, you had obviously sent me that Brent Venables video. And I think one thing I noticed, and kind of one of my first thoughts were, man, like I can't tell you the last time I saw OU even practice. Like, I can't tell you the last time I saw them, like on their practice field and wearing practice gear and everything. And it's like, wow, like, man, that just wasn't a thing. Like, I mean, they didn't film practice under Riley. And I know that was a big thing that people didn't like. But touching on the special teams a little bit, obviously it was an issue last year, and you saw it in Bedlam. I mean, you muffed that punt, and
gave up a kick return for a touchdown as well.
Gave up a kick return for a touchdown as well. Yeah, I mean, if those two don't happen, I think OU probably wins that game and might find themselves in the college football playoff last year. Yep. Obviously, you got the Big 12 championship, and what could have happened there, you don't know. But it's the little things, and it's not just OU where special teams is neglected. I mean, we saw it at Nebraska, but outside of just those two, I feel like it's just kind of nationwide now. Not a lot of teams put a ton of effort into special teams. And I know a big thing with kick returns is safety. And, most people will rather just kind of take the touchback versus, your dudes going full speed, right at each other. We've seen some nasty and career ending injuries there. But it's just little things. I mean, there's nothing wrong with fielding the punt. And, when a guy does return it, you got to tackle him. It's just the little things. And, you saw the little things beat you in Bedlam last year. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, even this it's going to be much better, even if they're not trying to return them, because it's being emphasized that you don't want your guys catching the ball inside the 5-yard line, which is where we muffed the punt in Bedlam. And that's why it was such a big deal. I mean, you muff the punt inside the 5, that's basically a touchdown. I mean, they got 4 plays to get 5 yards. But it's exciting times. Obviously, spring game coming up. They're pushing it extremely hard to sell it out. Usually they get like 30, 40K in the stadium, but they're going to try to sell it out this year. And I think they might just do it. So we'll just kind of watch that, see if there's any injuries that come out of spring ball. Hopefully not. But we'll kind of turn it over to Nebraska here. And they've got a couple interesting things going on right now.
Yeah. So, it's spring practice and obviously not a whole lot going on, just kind of figuring out who's going to play and reporters asking questions and, coaches won't really say, and, oh yeah, so-and-so is doing good, whatever. That's just kind of how spring ball is. But we got a bombshell the other day. Scott Frost informed everybody that Xavier Betts, as he direct quoted, Xavier is not a member of the team right now. Reporters pretty much just pounded him right away and tried to figure out what was going on. He did not go off of script and just said Xavier is not a member of our team right now. We have very, very little information. A lot of things we've seen, though, just says currently. Frost obviously just saying he's not a member of the team right now. I don't know if that's looking too much into it, but anytime you have a player that is not on your team, at any point, then, it's not good. I think moving forward, you kind of have to expect him to be out more than he is in. Maybe you get lucky and some things work themselves out and he's able to come back. But you never like one of your best receivers, and not being a member of the team at any point.
Yeah, absolutely. And he didn't have a ton of yards last year. I think under 200, but I mean,
I believe only had like 20 or 30 catches last year as well. Didn't have a
yeah,
ton, but I mean, he's a speedster. He's a burner and is a
yeah,
playmaker.
that's what I was going to say. I mean, I think he had a 55 or 50-yard catch against
Mhm.
Oklahoma. And I mean,
Yes.
just kind of beat everybody. But obviously, it's never a good thing to hear that. And especially from Oklahoma point of view, seen some receivers get into trouble over the years and be suspended indefinitely and never to be seen again. So
Yeah.
it's worrisome for sure.
Yeah. And then we've got a quote from Rick Kaczynski, who's a former defensive line coach at Nebraska. He came out and said, what we think is best for us at age 20 isn't always what's best. Ultimately, you got to figure out what it's about and if it's something that's fixable. You got to imagine he might have a couple ins just because he's a former coach at Nebraska. It just says that what we think is best for us at age 20 isn't always best. You don't want to speculate, but that's about as much as we've gotten in information wise, just not a lot getting out. But yeah, I mean, as you mentioned at Oklahoma, you've seen guys get kind of suspended indefinitely and then just never heard of again. Obviously one that comes to mind, Dorial Green Beckham, I believe, transferred from Missouri, top receiver, transfers to Oklahoma, suspended indefinitely, little bit of time in the NFL, and then just kind of never seen again, just couldn't stay out of trouble. Obviously we don't know if it is trouble or not, or what. But I mean, it definitely doesn't sound like he needed a break from the team, mental health reasons or family or anything like that. It definitely sounds like a negative break from the team.
Yeah, definitely had a negative connotation to it. And I'm sure stuff will start leaking out eventually as we get further in the off season before the season comes out. But we'll just kind of monitor that. And
Yeah.
I think we're about ready to flip over to the Final Four and preview that here.
Yeah. So, we've been talking a lot about the NCAA tournament, and obviously we've had some great games and are down to our Final Four teams. We've got Duke, North Carolina, and then Villanova and Kansas, obviously the winners of the four regions. In New Orleans for a spot at the national championship game and ultimately the national title. What are your thoughts headed into the last couple games here?
It's been an exciting tournament. Probably one of the, I wouldn't say best ever, but I mean, we've had a ton of surprises. And I do have to say we weren't particularly good in our Sweet 16 and Elite 8 picks.
No.
I think out of all the teams we just talked about, Kansas was the only team we had in there going to the Final Four. But
yeah, I think so.
But it was just one of those years. Arkansas went out and dominated Gonzaga, which I don't think anybody expected to happen. Houston beat Arizona pretty convincingly for the most part, and then they couldn't get anything going against Villanova, and that was kind of that. We've got Duke, UNC, Kansas, Villanova. I think two phenomenal matchups, and obviously one of which is just full of storylines.
Yeah, the whole Duke North Carolina thing. I don't want to say it was scripted, but it just, I don't know. I mean, I really wanted to see St. Peter's in the Final Four. I got right with my Sweet 16 pick and saying that they were going to beat Purdue. Obviously, just manhandled by North Carolina, just outmatched. And I think at some point it had to end. And I think North Carolina just had seen too much from them. You couldn't surprise them with anything. And, North Carolina is a team that, they like to play some hero ball, and if a guy's hot, they're going to continue to give it to him and let him shoot. And it's been Brady Manick so far. I mean, Brady Manick's been, lighting it up for North Carolina. And with that being said, I think they're an 8 seed for a reason. And this is a team that can get cold, and they've lost games. This is not a 1 or 2 seed. They're an 8 seed for a reason. But it's also North Carolina, and they're also playing Duke. I have a feeling, especially after that Baylor game, and that was just Baylor, I have a feeling this game could get really heated.
Yeah, I completely agree. And obviously, given the last result on Coach K and I at Duke, UNC just dominated them. And
Yeah.
Duke's going to come into this game ready to roll. I mean, if they don't, it would be pretty unexplainable in my opinion. Even in the ACC tournament going into the final, it was UNC versus Virginia Tech to see who was going to play Duke, and Paolo Banchero said, "I want UNC," and he's going to get a shot. Not in the ACC tournament, but in the Final Four on the biggest stage in college basketball. And I have a difficult time seeing UNC winning this one. Obviously, it's March. They've played phenomenal. They've already beat Baylor. It should be another really, really good game, but I expect Duke to pull this one out.
I do agree. I do think Duke probably wins this game. North Carolina is good, and I definitely think they've already beat them once. But I mean, we're talking this is the biggest stage in college basketball, and you've got a guy who has been doing it for 40 something years now, and this is his last potentially last game. He's going to bring it, and that Duke team is really good. They've impressed me. In my original bracket, I had them out in the round of 32, and they've just burned through and obviously made it all the way to the Final Four. I wasn't high on them entering the tournament, and they've absolutely proved me wrong. They've looked phenomenal so far. And if I had to put my money on it, I think they're probably the front runners right now. Even though, you still got a 1 seed left in Kansas, I think this Duke team could, handle them. You just you got to find a way to not let North Carolina get real hot. They're gonna make some mistakes. We saw it against Baylor. That game got a little bit out of hand from them, and obviously ended up blowing a 25-point lead, but fortunately winning. If Duke's able to shut down the hero ball a little bit, or North Carolina just goes cold, I think Duke wins easily. But even if somebody is hot from North Carolina, I do think that Duke should be able to handle them and manage and make their case for a national title.
Yeah, I completely agree. And we'll kind of look at the other matchup now. And that's Kansas and Villanova. And I said it on the last episode, Villanova was going to be a tough out for anybody. We both expected the winner of Arizona Houston to go to the Final Four, and Villanova came out and dominated Houston. Wire to wire, Houston couldn't get anything going. And I mean, obviously, when you've got a coach like Jay Wright on the sidelines, probably going to take over for Coach K, is probably the best coach in college basketball. If he has already, I think in a lot of people's mind, he probably has. It's going to be tough to beat him. And I've got Kansas over Villanova. I think a lot of that's because the injury to Justin Moore, he's averaging almost 15 points a game. I think that's just going to be too much to overcome, especially against a team like Kansas. Several seniors on that team, Oshai Baji, Christian Braun. It's a recipe for success for Kansas, in my opinion.
Yeah, that injury hurts him a lot. It was just a horrible injury watching it. I mean, you never like seeing that. Reminded me of Kevin Durant when Kevin Durant did that. Just looked almost the exact same. Obviously, the Achilles injury. But I mean, you got Jay Wright coaching, and he's got 2 national titles. He, as you mentioned, probably one of the best coaches in college basketball right now. And you've got him going up against Bill Self in Kansas. I mean, but just phenomenal coaches on both sides for both teams, I should say. I think Kansas probably pulls it out. I think the talent is just too great, especially with Villanova having that injury. I think Kansas probably pulls it out. But another game I could see going either way. The issue with Villanova, they just play real slow, and once you go down, you got to be able to get back up quick, and it's not something that this team does. They like keeping it close and manageable. If they go down by 10, 15 points, it's gonna be tough for them.
Yeah, I completely agree. So we've both got Duke and Kansas in the national championship game. I've got Duke. I just see it's a tough matchup for Kansas. I mean, Kansas can run with anybody, but I think the presence inside from Paulo Banchero and Mark Williams for Duke is just going to be too much for Kansas to overcome in the national championship. And I mean, obviously, the storyline is going to be Coach K in his last game. Can he get over the last little hill? And I think that they will. You said you were very high on him coming to the tournament. I was also in the same boat. I had him losing in the Sweet 16 to Tech, but I mean, they've just proven, I think, a lot of people wrong. I think a lot of people didn't expect them to get out of their region. And I mean, they didn't run through it. Tech was obviously a close game, but I mean, they were convincing.
Yeah, for sure. I'm gonna have to disagree with you here. I've got to go with Kansas. I picked them to win it all in the beginning, and they've fortunately gotten me at least to the Final Four. Thank God. They've just been so convincing, I think, through the whole tournament that I feel like they're going to be able to deal with anything. I mean, anytime you get to the national championship, it's going to be toss up. It can go either way. But you know, Kansas has won convincingly and also had some close games. Had that close game against Creighton, where they were tested, and obviously Providence close. And then just dominated the second half against Miami. It was a close game at half. And Miami scored, I think, 15 points in the second half as a whole. I think they're rolling right now, and that Miami victory is going to propel them. And I think Bill Self is going to get himself a national title here.
Yeah, I mean, it's absolutely going to be a toss-up game. It could go either way. I think it's a really good Final Four. Obviously, some of the biggest schools in college basketball: Duke, Villanova, UNC, Kansas. It's kind of a who's who, and it should be really exciting this weekend.
I think any four could win it, in all honesty.
Yep.
I think North Carolina is probably the lowest chance of winning it. But that being said, if they get hot and play like they have so far for this tournament, and even at the end of the regular season, I mean, they went in and Coach K's last home game and just gave it to them. If they're hot, I mean, they're good and they can win it too. It's going to be good. And I mean, we got 4 blue bloods. I think I obviously would have liked to see, maybe a team we don't usually see up there. Was really hoping St. Peter's could have made it to the Final Four. Obviously, I didn't think it was going to happen. I had Houston in my Final Four. They ultimately, eliminated by Villanova. I thought that was a team that maybe could have done some damage, especially once they got into the Final Four. Obviously, not able to make it. But April 2nd, 5 and 7, 45, 8-ish, I think is what the games are. Yeah, I mean, it's going to be a good way to end the season. I mean, like I said, I think it's going to be 2 good games and obviously a third one in the national title with 4 good teams.
Yeah, completely agree. It's going to be super entertaining, and I think everybody's going to be glued to the TV.
As I have been the entire tournament. I think I've watched almost every game. So that'll go ahead and wrap it up for us. As always, we appreciate you guys listening. Check out our social media pages, just at Fight Song Sports, Twitter and Instagram. Just uploaded our first TikTok a couple days ago, same handle as the rest. We have a link tree in our bios and all of our social media. You just click that, takes you to a link that has links to all of our social media pages. Upload obviously on SoundCloud and YouTube. Go watch both there. Well, we appreciate you guys listening, and we'll be back next week for you guys. Thank you.